The thunder cracked overhead as Josephine Neal clutched her baby tighter to her chest, her bare feet slipping in the mud as she ran through the driving rain toward the dim lights of Tonopah Junction, Nevada. She couldn't go back, not ever, not even if it meant dying out here in this storm with her 3-month-old son. The bruises on her face throbbed with each racing heartbeat, the fresh marks on her arms stinging where the rain hit them, but she pushed forward, desperation fueling every step. It was 1879, and the mining town of Tonopah Junction had sprung up almost overnight when silver deposits were discovered in the nearby mountains. The town was still rough around the edges, with more saloons than proper businesses, and Josephine had never felt more alone than she did now, stumbling through the darkness toward what she hoped might be sanctuary. Her cotton dress was soaked through, clinging to her slender frame, and little William was beginning to whimper despite her best efforts to shield him from the downpour. The distant rumble of hoofbeats sent a spike of terror through her heart. He had found them already. Ahead, through the curtain of rain, she spotted a small cabin set apart from the town's main street, a faint golden light spilling from its windows. With no time to consider her options, Josephine veered toward it, praying whoever lived there had enough kindness in their heart not to turn away a desperate woman and her baby. Miles Dawson was just settling in for the night when he heard the frantic pounding on his door. He set down his coffee mug and reached for the revolver he kept on the shelf beside his chair out of habit. 3 years as a Texas Ranger and 5 more as a bounty hunter had taught him to be cautious. "Who's there?" he called, approaching the door slowly. "Please help us." The woman's voice was barely audible over the storm, but the raw terror in it made Miles unlock his door immediately. When he pulled it open, he found a woman standing there, soaked to the bone, her face streaked with rain and tears and unmistakable bruises. In her arms, she clutched a bundle that gave a tiny, mewling cry. "He's coming," she gasped, her eyes wide with fear as she glanced over her shoulder. "Please, he'll kill us both." Without hesitation, Miles ushered her inside, closing and locking the door behind them. "You're safe now, madam. Let's get you both dry." "There's no time," she whispered urgently. "He followed me, my husband, he's right behind me." Miles took in her appearance more carefully now, her split lip, the dark bruise flowering on her cheekbone, the finger marks around her throat. Something hard and cold settled in his gut. He'd seen plenty of evil during his years upholding the law, but few things stirred his anger like a man who would raise his hand to a woman. "What's your name?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle despite the fury building inside him. "Josephine," she said, her teeth chattering. "Josephine Neal, this is William, my son." Miles grabbed a blanket from his bed and wrapped it around her shoulders. "I'm Miles Dawson. Former Ranger, now I work for the Silver Star Mining Company as security." He nodded toward the back of the cabin. "There's a small bedroom through there. Take your boy and stay quiet." The sound of approaching hoofbeats grew louder and Josephine's face went ashen. "That's him. That's Edgar," she whispered, clutching her baby tighter. "Go on now," Miles urged, guiding her toward the back room. "Not a sound, no matter what you hear." Once she was hidden away, Miles moved quickly. He stoked the fire, hung his coat by the door, and positioned his chair to face the entrance. He placed his revolver on the small table beside him, within easy reach but not immediately visible to someone at the door. The pounding came moments later, hard enough to rattle the wooden frame. "Open up, I know she's in there." The man's voice was slurred with drink and fury. "That's my wife and my boy, and I'm taking them home." Miles took his time answering, letting the man stew in the rain. When he finally approached the door, he left it closed. "Who's calling at this hour in such weather?" he asked calmly. "Edgar Neal from over Silver Peak Way." "My wife's run off with my son, and I tracked her here. Open this damn door before I break it down." Miles considered his options. He could send the man away, claim he hadn't seen anyone, but that might only delay the inevitable. No, he knew men like Edgar Neal, they didn't stop until they got what they wanted or someone stopped them permanently. "Hold your horses," Miles replied. unbolting the door and swinging it open to reveal a burly man with rain-slicked hair and rage in his bloodshot eyes. Edgar was tall and broad-shouldered, with the powerful build of someone who worked with his hands. A miner, most likely, given the area. His clothes were mud-splattered and his face was flushed with drink and anger. "Where is she?" he demanded, trying to look past Miles into the cabin. Miles filled the doorway with his own lean, muscular frame. At 32, he was still in his prime, hardened by years of tracking outlaws across unforgiving terrain. "You're mistaken," Miles said evenly. "There's no woman here." Edgar's eyes narrowed. "I saw her running this way." "Don't lie to me, mister. That's my property you're hiding." Something dangerous flashed in Miles's eyes. No man's wife is his property, nor his child. Edgar took a threatening step forward. "You don't know what you're getting involved in." "That woman's my lawful wedded wife, and I have every right to beat her," Miles interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. "To put those bruises on her face. To terrify her so badly she'd run through a storm with an infant rather than spend another minute under your roof." Edgar's face contorted with rage. "She's a liar and a troublemaker. Whatever she told you, she didn't have to tell me anything," Miles cut in. "Her face told me plenty." He straightened to his full height, his hand resting casually near his holster. "Now I suggest you turn around and ride back where you came from. The woman isn't here, but even if she was, I wouldn't let you near her." "You can't stop me from searching your place," Edgar snarled, reaching for the pistol tucked into his belt. Miles was faster. His revolver cleared leather before Edgar's fingers touched his weapon. "I wouldn't," Miles advised quietly. "I've put men in the ground for less than what you've done to that woman." Edgar froze, his gaze locked on the steady barrel of Miles's gun. For a moment, the only sound was the rain drumming on the roof and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. "This isn't over," Edgar finally ground out, backing away slowly. "I'll be back with the sheriff. A man's got rights." "So does a woman," Miles replied steadily. "And a child." "Think on that before you come back." Edgar spat on the ground, then turned and stomped back to his horse. Miles watched him mount up and ride away into the stormy night, waiting until the hoofbeats faded entirely before closing and bolting his door. When he went to the back room, he found Josephine huddled in the corner, her baby clutched to her chest. She had wrapped them both in the blanket he'd given her, but she was still trembling. "He's gone for now," Miles told her gently. "But he'll likely be back with the sheriff in the morning, claiming his rights as your husband." Fresh tears spilled down Josephine's cheeks. "Sheriff Hollister is Edgar's drinking friend. He'll side with him. They all will." She looked down at her baby boy, who had finally fallen asleep despite the commotion. "What am I going to do?" Miles considered her situation. He'd seen enough of the world to know that the law didn't always protect those who needed it most. A husband had almost absolute authority over his wife and children, and few would interfere in what was considered a private matter. "For tonight, you're safe here," he assured her. "I'll keep watch. Tomorrow we'll figure something out." He brought her dry clothes, a shirt and trousers of his that would be too large but better than her soaked dress, and turned his back while she changed. He heated water for a basin so she could wash and warmed milk for the baby. All the while, his mind worked on their predicament. "How long have you been married?" he asked as Josephine settled in a chair by the fire, feeding little William. 3 years, she replied, her voice hollow. "Edgar wasn't always like this, or perhaps he was and I was too young and foolish to see it." She looked down at her son's face. "Things got worse after William was born. Edgar wanted a son, but now he resents every minute I spend caring for the baby instead of him." "And the bruises?" Josephine touched her cheek reflexively. "The first time was about 6 months after we were married." He apologized, swore it would never happen again, but it did, of course, more and more often. "When I found out I was expecting, he was careful for a while, didn't leave marks where anyone could see after William came." She trailed off, unable to continue. Tonight was worse than usual. Miles prompted gently. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes again. He'd been drinking since morning, said the baby's crying was driving him mad. He grabbed William from his cradle and shook him. Her voice broke. I tried to stop him and he struck me, but I managed to get the baby. When Edgar passed out on the floor, I knew it was our only chance. I took what little money I could find and ran. Miles felt his jaw tighten. He dealt with all manner of outlaws and desperados, but men who hurt their own families stirred a particular loathing in him. You did the right thing, he assured her. You protected your son. But what now? Josephine asked, the despair evident in her voice. Edgar will find us. The law will make me go back. I have no family, no money of my own. Miles considered her words. She was right about the law. A husband's rights were nearly absolute, and few judges would interfere in a marital dispute, especially over something as minor as a beating. I have a friend in Carson City, he said slowly, forming a plan as he spoke. She runs a boarding house for women in difficult circumstances. If we can get you there, you'd be safe for a while at least. Hope flickered briefly in Josephine's eyes. Carson City, that's nearly 100 miles from here. I know, Miles acknowledged. But I also know these mountains better than most. There are trails Edgar and the sheriff won't know about. Josephine studied his face, trying to understand why this stranger would risk so much to help her. Why would you do this for us? You don't even know me. Miles was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. My sister was married to a man like your Edgar, he finally said. She stayed because she believed she had nowhere else to go. One night he went too far. His voice hardened. By the time I arrived, it was too late for her. Understanding dawned in Josephine's eyes, along with a deep sorrow. I'm so sorry. Miles nodded, accepting her sympathy. Get some rest now. You'll need your strength tomorrow. You can have the bed. I'll keep watch out here. Thank you, Josephine whispered, rising carefully with her now sleeping son. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Live, Miles told her simply. Live and raise that boy to be a better man than his father. That'll be payment enough. As Josephine retreated to the small bedroom, Miles sat by the window, watching the rain taper off as the storm moved eastward. He knew he was risking much by helping her his job, possibly even his freedom if Edgar convinced the sheriff he'd kidnapped a man's wife and child. But looking at Josephine's bruised face, at the innocent baby in her arms, he knew he couldn't have done anything else. Morning came with a clear sky and the distant sound of multiple horses approaching. Miles had been ready for hours, having packed supplies and saddled his sturdy buckskin gelding before first light. They're coming, he told Josephine, who was preparing a small bundle of baby clothes and the few supplies Miles had been able to provide. We need to go now. Josephine nodded, her face pale but determined. She had fashioned a sling from a blanket to carry William close to her body, leaving her hands free. The back way, Miles instructed, leading her through the rear door of the cabin. Stay low and follow me to those trees. They moved silently across the wet ground, keeping to the shadows. Miles's horse waited in a small copse of pines already loaded with provisions. He helped Josephine mount, then swung up behind her just as shouts erupted from the direction of the cabin. They've found it empty, Miles murmured. Hold tight now. He guided the horse up a narrow deer trail that wound into the foothills, away from the main roads. Behind them, they could hear men calling to each other, organizing a search. Miles pressed on, confident in his knowledge of the terrain and his horse's sure-footedness. By midday, they had gained considerable distance, climbing into the pine-covered mountains where the air grew cooler and the trails more challenging. Miles guided them through hidden passages and natural cuts in the rocky landscape, always alert for signs of pursuit. We'll rest here a while, he announced when they reached a small, protected hollow with a fresh spring. Give the baby a chance to nurse and the horse to recover. Josephine gratefully slid from the saddle, her legs stiff from the unaccustomed hours of riding. William had been remarkably quiet throughout their flight, but now he was fussing, hungry, and in need of changing. As Miles secured the horse and checked their surroundings, Josephine tended to her son. She had just finished nursing him when Miles returned with water from the spring. "No sign of followers yet," he reported, offering her the canteen. "But Edgar knows these mountains too. We need to keep moving as soon as you're ready." Josephine nodded, taking a long drink before handing the canteen back. "I'm ready now." Miles took a moment to study her face. The bruises had darkened overnight, but there was a new strength in her eyes, a determination that hadn't been there when she first appeared at his door. "You're a brave woman, Josephine Neal," he said quietly. A faint blush colored her cheeks. "Not brave, just desperate." "Sometimes those are the same thing." Miles helped her secure William in the sling again. "Courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about doing what needs to be done despite the fear." They continued their journey through the afternoon, following game trails and old Native American paths that weren't marked on any map. Miles kept them moving steadily, always watchful, always listening for signs of pursuit. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, he guided them to another sheltered spot, this one beneath an overhanging rock that would hide the small fire he built for warmth. "We'll rest here for the night," he decided, helping Josephine down. "We've made good progress today." Josephine sank gratefully onto the blanket Miles spread near the fire. William had slept for the past hour, lulled by the steady rhythm of the horse, but now he was awake and looking around with curious eyes. "He's a handsome boy," Miles observed as he prepared a simple meal from their provisions. "Got your eyes?" Josephine smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Yes, thank goodness, and hopefully my temperament too." They ate in companionable silence as darkness fell, the small fire casting flickering shadows against the rock. In the distance, an owl called, its lonely cry echoing through the mountains. "Do you think they're still following?" Josephine asked, settling William against her shoulder to burp him. Miles considered the question. "Edgar won't give up easily. He struck me as a man who doesn't take kindly to losing what he considers his." "I was never his," Josephine said softly, a flash of anger in her eyes. "Not really. He may have had my hand in marriage, but he never had my heart." "How did you come to marry him?" Miles asked, curious about her story. Josephine sighed, looking into the fire. "My father died when I was 16. Mother and I struggled to keep our small farm going, but it was too much for us. By the time I was 19, Mother was ill, and we were facing losing everything." She stroked William's downy head. "Edgar Neal seemed like salvation at the time. He had a good position at the mine, a sturdy house. He courted me with politeness and promises. Mother died shortly after our wedding, and that's when things changed." "I'm sorry," Miles said simply, understanding filling in the gaps in her story. "What about you?" Josephine asked. "You said you were a Texas Ranger. How did you end up in Nevada?" Miles poked at the fire with a stick. "After my sister died, I couldn't stay in Texas anymore. Too many memories. I drifted west, took work where I could find it. My experience with a gun made me valuable to the mining companies dealing with claim jumpers and thieves." "Do you like it here?" he considered her question. "It's peaceful most days. The mountains have a way of putting things in perspective." He looked up at the stars now visible above them. "But I miss having purpose sometimes. Real purpose, not just guarding other men's silver." They talked late into the night, sharing pieces of their lives, finding unexpected common ground. Miles told her about his childhood in East Texas, about the sister he'd lost, about his years enforcing the law in a territory that often seemed to have none. Josephine spoke of her dreams before marriage had narrowed her world, of the books she loved to read, of her hopes for William's future. When Josephine finally dozed off with William cradled against her, Miles kept watch, his revolver close at hand. There was something about this woman that stirred protective instincts in him that went beyond his memories of his sister. Her quiet strength, her devotion to her son, the intelligence that shone in her eyes despite her fear, they all spoke to him in a way no woman had in years. Dawn broke clear and cold, with frost dusting the ground around their campsite. Miles had let the fire burn down to embers, not wanting the smoke to give away their position. We should reach Carson City by nightfall if we push hard, he told Josephine as they ate a quick breakfast. My friend Martha will take good care of you there. Josephine nodded, but there was a new worry in her eyes. What will you do? Edgar will be looking for revenge against you too, Miles shrugged. I can take care of myself, been doing it a long time. But your job, your home. Jobs come and go, he said simply. And four walls don't make a home. They were preparing to mount up when Miles suddenly tensed, his hand going to his revolver. Josephine followed his gaze and saw dust rising in the distance, down the slope they had climbed the previous day. Riders, Miles confirmed grimly. At least 3, maybe 4. Fear flashed across Josephine's face as she clutched William closer. Edgar, most likely, Miles made a quick decision. Change of plans, we need to split up. What? No. The panic in Josephine's voice was immediate. Listen to me, Miles said urgently. There's an old line shack about 2 miles north of here. It belongs to the mining company. I have a key. He pressed it into her hand. Take the horse and go there. I'll lead them away, then circle back for you after dark. But what if you can't? Tears welled in her eyes. What if they catch you? They won't, he assured her with more confidence than he felt. I know these mountains better than they do. He quickly gave her directions to the line shack, making her repeat them until he was satisfied she understood. Miles, I can't ask you to risk your life for us, Josephine protested, even as he helped her onto the horse. You didn't ask, he reminded her. Now go, stay hidden, keep William quiet, I'll come for you. Josephine looked down at him, conflict evident in her expression. Then, making a sudden decision, she leaned down and pressed her lips to his in a brief, desperate kiss. For luck, she whispered as she pulled away. Be careful. Before Miles could respond, she urged the horse forward, disappearing into the trees heading north. Miles watched until she was out of sight, then turned to face the approaching riders. He would need to be convincing to draw them away from Josephine's trail. He moved quickly down the slope, choosing a route that would leave clear tracks while heading east, away from Josephine's path. When he judged he had gone far enough, he found a position with good visibility and settled in to wait. The riders appeared within the hour. Edgar, Sheriff Hollister, and 2 other men Miles didn't recognize. They were moving cautiously, scanning the ground for signs. Neal. Miles called out, stepping into view just long enough to be recognized before ducking behind a large boulder. Looking for something? Dawson? Edgar's enraged voice echoed off the rocks. Where's my wife and boy? Safe from you, Miles called back, moving laterally to another position. Which is all that matters. Gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off stone near where Miles had been standing. He returned fire, deliberately aiming high, wanting to lead them on a chase rather than end things here. Your wife told me everything, Neal, Miles shouted as he moved again. About how you shake that baby when he cries, about how you've been beating her since you were newlyweds. What kind of man does that make you? More gunfire answered him, closer this time. Miles fired back, then began working his way eastward, leaving clear signs for them to follow while gradually increasing his pace. The chase continued through the morning and into the afternoon, a dangerous game of cat and mouse through the rocky terrain. Miles led them on a winding path away from the line shack, using every trick he had learned in his years as a ranger to stay just ahead of his pursuers. By mid-afternoon, he had managed to circle around toward the north again, though he kept well east of the line shack's location. The men following him had spread out, making it harder for him to track all of them. Miles moved carefully now, aware that one mistake could prove fatal. He was crossing a small clearing when the shot came, the bullet tearing through his left shoulder with a white-hot burst of pain. Miles stumbled but kept moving, reaching the cover of trees on the far side before allowing himself to assess the damage. The wound was bleeding freely, but the bullet had passed clean through the flesh without hitting bone. Miles quickly bound it with a bandana, gritting his teeth against the pain. He needed to keep moving. The shot would bring the others running. Voices approached, and Miles forced himself to his feet, pushing deeper into the forest. The light was beginning to fade now, making it harder for his pursuers to follow his trail. He used every advantage the terrain offered, wading through streams to hide his tracks, doubling back to confuse his trail. As full darkness fell, Miles finally felt confident he had lost them, at least temporarily. He rested briefly to regain his strength, then began the careful journey back toward the lined shack. His shoulder throbbed with every step, and he knew he was still losing blood despite his makeshift bandage. It was well past midnight when he finally approached the small cabin, its dark silhouette barely visible among the trees. Miles paused, watching for any sign that Edgar and his men had somehow found it first, but all was quiet. He approached cautiously, tapping softly on the door. Josephine. "It's Miles." The door opened immediately, revealing Josephine's worried face. She gasped when she saw him, reaching out to steady him as he swayed slightly. "You're hurt," she exclaimed, helping him inside and quickly bolting the door behind them. "Just a graze," Miles lied, not wanting to worry her further. "How's William?" "Sleeping," she whispered, guiding him to a chair near the small stove where she had kept a fire burning low. "I was so afraid you wouldn't come back." In the faint light, Miles could see she had been crying. Her relief at seeing him was palpable, and something in his chest tightened at the realization. "I promised I would," he reminded her, wincing as she helped him remove his coat to examine his wound. "This is not a graze," Josephine scolded gently, her fingers carefully probing around the injury. "The bullet went right through you." "That's good," Miles managed a weak smile, "saves the trouble of digging it out." Josephine was already gathering clean cloths and water. "I need to clean this properly and stop the bleeding. It will hurt." Miles nodded, bracing himself as she set to work. Her hands were gentle but thorough as she cleaned away the dried blood and applied pressure to the wound. "You're good at this," he observed through clenched teeth. "My father was a doctor before he became a farmer," she explained, working methodically. "He taught me the basics of tending wounds." "Hold still now." Miles did as instructed, watching her face as she concentrated on her task. Even in the dim light, with worry lining her features, she was beautiful. The realization struck him with unexpected force. "Did you lose them?" she asked as she began bandaging his shoulder with strips of clean cloth. "For now," Miles confirmed. "But Edgar's not the type to give up easily. We'll need to move on at first light." Josephine's hands faltered momentarily. "You're in no condition to travel." "We don't have a choice," Miles insisted. "They'll keep searching these mountains, and eventually they'll find this place. Carson City is still our best option." When she had finished bandaging his shoulder, Josephine insisted he take the small cot in the corner of the cabin while she kept watch. Miles was too exhausted to argue, though he made her promise to wake him in a few hours so he could take his turn. He must have fallen asleep immediately, because the next thing he knew, pale dawn light was filtering through the cabin's single window, and Josephine was gently shaking him awake. "Miles," she whispered urgently. "There's someone outside." He was instantly alert, reaching for his gun despite the pain that shot through his injured shoulder. "Where's William?" "Here," she indicated the baby, wrapped securely and placed in a wooden crate that she had padded with blankets. "He's still sleeping." Miles moved carefully to the window, staying to one side as he peered out. A single rider was approaching the cabin, moving slowly, cautiously. It wasn't Edgar or the sheriff. This man was older, with a gray beard and the weathered look of a prospector. "Stay back," Miles instructed Josephine, positioning himself by the door with his revolver ready. The knock came a moment later, followed by a gruff voice. "Hello? Anybody in there? I saw smoke from your chimney." Miles exchanged a glance with Josephine, who looked terrified. He put a finger to his lips, indicating she should remain silent. "Who's asking?" Miles called through the door. "Name's Harlan Gibbs. I prospect these hills. Got a claim about 3 miles west of here, just being neighborly." Miles considered their options. The man could be genuine, or he could be working with Edgar. Either way, sending him away without raising suspicion would be the best course. "Appreciate the visit, Mr. Gibbs," Miles called back. "Just passing through doing some hunting. All's well here." There was a pause. "You sure about that?" Ran into some fellas yesterday looking for a man who took off with another man's wife and baby. Said the fella was wounded. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Miles tightened his grip on his revolver. Can't say that I do. Another pause. Thing is, those men didn't strike me as the honest sort, especially the one claiming to be the husband. Had mean eyes, that one. The old prospector cleared his throat. If you was the fella they're looking for, I'd tell you they're searching east of here today. And I'd mention there's a wagon train heading to Carson City, leaving from Dayton tomorrow morning. Good folks who might not ask too many questions if a woman and baby wanted to join them. Miles and Josephine exchanged surprised looks. That's good information for someone in trouble, Miles finally replied cautiously. Well, I've said my piece, the prospector announced more loudly. Good hunting to you, stranger. Dayton's about 15 miles northwest of here, case you get tired of these woods. They listened as the man remounted his horse and rode away. Miles kept watch until he was certain the prospector was truly gone and hadn't circled back. Do you think we can trust him? Josephine asked, cradling William, who had awakened during the exchange. Miles considered it carefully. He had no reason to lie about Edgar searching to the east, and he could have brought them straight to us if he wanted to. Then we should try for this wagon train, hope tinged Josephine's voice. It's risky, Miles acknowledged, but staying here is risky too. At least with a wagon train you'd have safety in numbers. We would have safety, Josephine corrected him firmly. You're coming with us. Miles looked at her, touched by her concern. My shoulder will slow us down. Then we'll go slowly, she insisted, but we go together. I won't leave you behind, Miles Dawson, not after everything you've done for us. There was something in her eyes that made argument impossible. Miles nodded, accepting her decision. Together, then, we should leave within the hour. They gathered what supplies they could from the line shack, Miles moving more stiffly than he would have liked. His shoulder throbbed persistently, and he knew he had a fever, but he kept that information to himself. Josephine had enough to worry about. The journey to Dayton would take them most of the day, even pushing hard. Miles helped Josephine onto the horse, then handed William up to her before mounting behind them, gritting his teeth against the pain the movement caused. Lean back against me if you get tired, he told her. And tell me if you need to stop for the baby. Josephine nodded, settling William more securely in his sling. I'm ready. They set off through the trees, heading northwest as the old prospector had directed. Miles kept them off the main trails, still wary of Edgar and his men, though the information that they were searching to the east gave him some comfort. The day grew warm as the sun rose higher, and Miles found himself struggling to stay alert as his fever worsened. Twice Josephine insisted they stop to rest and check his wound, her concern evident in the tight set of her mouth when she saw how inflamed the injury had become. You're burning up, she told him during their second stop, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. We need to find you a doctor. After we reach the wagon train, Miles insisted. Your safety comes first. Josephine looked as though she wanted to argue but instead helped him back onto the horse. As they continued their journey, she began telling stories to keep him alert, tales of her childhood, her dreams for William's future, books she had read and places she hoped to see someday. I always wanted to see the ocean, she confessed as the afternoon waned. Edgar promised to take me to San Francisco after we were married, but it never happened. You'll see it, Miles assured her, his voice rougher than usual with pain and fatigue. You and William both. The Pacific is something to behold like nothing else on Earth. You've been there. She asked, turning slightly to look at him. Miles nodded, momentarily lost in memory. After I left Texas, worked my way west until I hit the coast, stayed in San Francisco for nearly a year before the mountains called me inland again. What's it like, the ocean? Vast, Miles said simply. Makes a man feel small, but not in a bad way. More like, it puts things in perspective, makes troubles seem less significant. I'd like that, Josephine said softly. Perspective. As the sun began to set, they finally glimpsed the town of Dayton in the distance. nestled in a valley with the Carson River flowing nearby. Miles guided them to a sheltered spot in the hills overlooking the settlement. "We'll wait until full dark," he decided. "Less chance of being recognized that way." Josephine nodded, helping him dismount and settling him against a tree trunk. She tended to William while Miles rested, the fever making him drift in and out of awareness. "Miles." Her voice pulled him back to consciousness some time later. Night had fallen completely, and she was kneeling beside him, her face pale in the moonlight. "It's time to go," he nodded, allowing her to help him to his feet. The world swam alarmingly, but he steadied himself with sheer determination. "I'll be all right," he assured her, seeing her worried expression. "Just need to get down to the town." They left the horse hobbled in the sheltered glen. It would find its way back to Tonopah Junction eventually, and they couldn't risk it being recognized in town. Miles leaned heavily on Josephine as they made their way down toward Dayton, every step sending fresh waves of pain through his shoulder. The town was mostly quiet when they reached it, though light and piano music spilled from the saloon on the main street. Miles directed them toward the livery stable where wagon trains typically gathered before departure. "There," he whispered, pointing to a collection of wagons circled near the stable. Several campfires burned low, with figures moving around them preparing evening meals. They approached cautiously, Miles trying to stand straighter despite his weakness. A burly man with a thick beard looked up as they neared the nearest fire. "Evening," Miles called softly. "We heard there's a wagon train heading to Carson City tomorrow." The man studied them suspiciously, taking in Miles's obvious injury and Josephine's fading bruises. "Who's asking?" "Folks in need of safe passage," Miles replied honestly. "We're willing to pay." The man's gaze softened slightly when he noticed William in Josephine's arms. "You running from something?" Josephine stepped forward. "From someone, my husband, he." She gestured to her face, the bruises still visible in the firelight. Understanding dawned in the man's eyes, followed by a flash of anger. "I see." He seemed to make a decision. "Name's Thomas Burke. I'm wagon master for this group. We're headed to Carson City, then on to California for some." "We only need to reach Carson City," Josephine explained. "I have a friend there who can help us." Burke nodded slowly. "We leave at first light." "You're welcome to join us, but I should warn you, if trouble follows, it follows all of us." "The man following us doesn't know we're heading this way," Miles assured him, "and we'll pull our weight on the journey." Burke studied Miles's pale face and the way he leaned against Josephine for support. "You need a doctor before you need a wagon train, mister. He was shot yesterday," Josephine explained, her voice tight with worry. "Helping us escape." Burke sighed heavily. "My sister-in-law has some medical knowledge. Let me take you to her." He turned and called toward another wagon. "Martha. Got some folks here need your help." A stout woman with graying hair emerged from a nearby wagon, wiping her hands on her apron. She took one look at Miles and immediately began issuing orders. "Bring him to my wagon. Quickly now, Sarah, fetch my medicine box. John, more light if you please." Miles found himself being half-carried to the woman's wagon and settled onto a bedroll. The world was spinning more insistently now, darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision. "Josephine," he managed, reaching out blindly. "I'm here," her voice came from nearby, her cool hand finding his. "I'm not going anywhere." That was the last thing Miles heard before consciousness slipped away entirely. When he awoke, pale morning light was filtering through canvas above him. He blinked, disoriented, before memory returned. The wagon, Dayton, the journey to Carson City. "Welcome back," came Josephine's voice. She moved into his field of vision, looking tired but relieved. "You gave us quite a scare." Miles tried to sit up and winced at the sharp pain in his shoulder. It was freshly bandaged, he noted, and someone had removed his shirt and boots. "How long was I out?" he asked, his voice rough. "All night," Josephine replied, helping him drink from a canteen. "Martha cleaned your wound properly and gave you something for the fever. She says you're lucky the bullet missed anything vital, but the wound was becoming infected." Miles nodded, taking stock of his body. He still felt weak, but the feverish confusion had receded. "The wagon train. We're already on our way," Josephine told him with a small smile. "You've been sleeping in Martha's wagon for the past 3 hours." "We left Dayton at dawn, just as Mr. Burke promised." Relief washed over Miles. They had made it this far, at least. "Any sign of pursuit?" Josephine shook her head. "None. Mr. Burke posted lookouts just in case, but the road has been clear." She hesitated, then added, "He knows what we're running from now. I told him everything last night while Martha was tending to you. The whole train is watching out for us." Miles reached for her hand, squeezing it weakly. "Good people." "Yes," Josephine agreed softly, "like you." Before Miles could respond, Martha appeared at the wagon's opening. "Ah, he's awake. Excellent. Let's have a look at that shoulder." The older woman examined Miles's wound with practiced hands, nodding with satisfaction. "Looking better already. The herbs are drawing out the infection. Another day of rest, and you'll be on the mend properly." "Thank you, madam," Miles said sincerely. Martha waved away his thanks. "Any man willing to take a bullet protecting a woman and child from a brute deserves what help I can give." She patted Josephine's hand. "Your wife has been a rock, young man. Wouldn't leave your side all night." Neither Miles nor Josephine corrected her assumption about their relationship. After Martha left to help with the midday meal, an awkward silence fell between them. "She seems to think." Josephine began. "Yes," Miles agreed. "Probably easier to let them believe it." Josephine nodded, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I should check on William. He's with Sarah, Martha's daughter. She offered to watch him while I tended to you." As she turned to go, Miles caught her hand. "Josephine." He waited until she met his eyes. "Thank you for not leaving me behind." Something flickered in her gaze, an emotion he couldn't quite name. "I would never," she said simply, before slipping out of the wagon. The journey to Carson City took 2 more days, with the wagon train moving at a steady pace along the well-traveled road. Miles regained enough strength by the second day to sit outside during their evening camp, joining the others around the fire. The Burke family and their companions were primarily farmers heading to California to start new lives, with a few merchants and tradesmen among them. They accepted Miles and Josephine without prying too deeply into their story, though Miles noticed the men taking turns keeping watch at night, rifles ready. On the evening of the second day, as they sat around the fire after supper, Thomas Burke approached Miles with a concerned expression. "Rider coming in from the east," he reported quietly. "Just one moving fast." Miles tensed, his hand going instinctively to the revolver he'd kept close despite his injury. "Edgar?" Burke shook his head. "Don't think so. Older man, gray beard, says he's looking for you specifically." Josephine, who had been sitting nearby with William, moved closer to Miles, fear evident in her expression. "Describe him again," Miles requested, a suspicion forming. When Burke did, Miles relaxed slightly. "I think it might be Harlan Gibbs, the prospector who warned us about Edgar." "Let me talk to him." The old man who approached the fire a few minutes later was indeed the prospector who had visited the line shack. He removed his hat when he saw Miles and Josephine, nodding respectfully. "Glad to see you made it this far," he said without preamble. "Wasn't sure you would, what with that shoulder wound." "How did you find us?" Miles asked, still cautious. Gibbs shrugged. "Wasn't hard to figure you'd head for Dayton after our talk. I followed at a distance to make sure you weren't being trailed." He glanced at Josephine and William. "But that's not why I rode after you. Thought you should know that fella Edgar and the sheriff returned to Tonopah Junction yesterday." Miles felt Josephine tense beside him. "They gave up the search." "Not exactly," Gibbs replied grimly. "They're gathering more men." "Edgar's been telling anyone who'll listen that you kidnapped his wife and child, offering a reward for information." He looked directly at Josephine. "He's not going to stop, madam." Josephine's face had gone pale. "Even in Carson City we won't be safe." "Maybe not," Gibbs agreed. "Which is why I brought you these." He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew several folded papers, handing them to Miles. Found these among Edgar's things when I happened by your cabin, madam. Thought they might be of use to you. Miles unfolded the papers, scanning them quickly. His eyes widened. These are deeds, mining claims in California, Gibbs nodded. Valuable ones too, from what I hear, worth a small fortune if they pan out. He looked at Josephine. They're in your name, madam. Wedding gift from your father, looks like. Josephine took the papers with shaking hands. I never knew. Edgar must have kept these from me. She looked up at the prospector. Why would you give these to me? They must be worth more than an old man like me needs, Gibbs finished for her. Besides, they're rightfully yours. And from what I've seen, you need a fresh start far from here. He nodded toward William, sleeping peacefully in Josephine's arms. That little one deserves better than a father who'd raise his hand to his mother. Miles studied the old man, trying to understand his motivations. Why help us at all? You don't know us. Gibbs was quiet for a moment, his weathered face solemn in the firelight. Had a daughter once. Her husband was a man like Edgar Neal. By the time I found out what was happening, it was too late. He looked away into the darkness beyond the fire. Maybe helping you makes up for not being there when she needed me. The simple honesty of his words struck Miles deeply. He extended his hand to the older man. Thank you. Gibbs shook it firmly. Those claims are near Sacramento, far enough from Nevada that Edgar Neal won't find you easily. He turned to go, then paused. One more thing. Sheriff Hollister's been replaced. Seems the county officials didn't take kindly to him helping Neal hunt down a woman and baby. New sheriffs asking questions about Edgar's treatment of his wife. With that final piece of news, Gibbs mounted his horse and rode back into the night, refusing their offers of food and shelter. They watched him go, this unexpected ally who had given them a chance at a new beginning. Sacramento, Josephine whispered, looking down at the deeds in her hand. I never thought. Miles covered her hand with his. It's your decision, Carson City or California, she met his gaze steadily. What about you? What will you do? It was the question Miles had been avoiding since they joined the wagon train. His plan had been to see Josephine and William safely to Carson City, to his friend's boarding house, and then… What? Return to Tonopah Junction. That was impossible now. Find work elsewhere in Nevada. The territory was too small. Word of what had happened would follow him. I haven't decided, he answered honestly. Josephine studied his face in the firelight. These claims are in my name. If they're as valuable as Mr. Gibbs believes, I'll need someone who knows about mining, someone I can trust. She took a deep breath. Would you consider coming to California with us? As a partner in the venture, Miles felt something shift in his chest at her words. A partner, not charity, not obligation, but a shared future. I would, he said softly, if you're sure that's what you want. It is, she replied without hesitation. William and I both want you with us. The next morning, Miles spoke with Thomas Burke about changing their destination. The wagon master was heading to Sacramento himself and was happy to have them continue with the train all the way to California. Safer that way, he agreed, especially if this Edgar fella is still looking for you. As they broke camp and prepared for another day's travel, Miles found himself watching Josephine with William, noting how her face had begun to lose the haunted look she had worn when she first appeared at his door. There was hope there now, and something more, a quiet strength that had always been within her but was only now finding expression. He was still watching her when Martha appeared at his side, her keen eyes missing nothing. She's a fine woman, the older woman observed. Been through hell, but it hasn't broken her. Miles nodded. She's stronger than she knows, and you, Martha asked shrewdly. What are your intentions once you reach California? I've agreed to help her develop the mining claims, Miles replied carefully. As a business partner. Martha made a skeptical noise. Business partners don't look at each other the way you two do. When Miles didn't respond, she continued more gently. Life's too short for hesitation, young man, especially after you've both seen how quickly it can be taken away. With that piece of wisdom delivered, she moved off to help her daughter with the breakfast cleanup. leaving Miles to consider her words. The wagon train continued westward, crossing into California 3 days later. The journey brought its own challenges: rough roads, a broken wagon wheel, a brief summer storm that turned the trail to mud, but they faced each one together, the shared difficulties binding the travelers into a community. Miles's shoulder healed slowly but steadily under Martha's care. By the time they reached the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, he could use his arm again, though it still ached in the cool evenings. Josephine had taken to sitting beside him during those times, sometimes talking, sometimes simply sharing the comfortable silence of companionship. William thrived during the journey, growing visibly stronger each day. He had become a favorite among the wagon train's travelers, passed from one doting temporary aunt or uncle to another during rest stops. Miles found himself increasingly drawn to the child, marveling at his tiny features, his budding personality, the trust in his eyes when Miles held him. One evening, as they camped in a meadow with the mountains rising majestically around them, Miles found Josephine standing a little apart from the others, gazing westward toward their destination. "Penny for your thoughts," he said as he joined her. She smiled, the expression transforming her face. The bruises had faded completely now, leaving only the natural beauty that had been masked by fear and pain when they first met. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in such a short time," she replied. 2 weeks ago, I thought my life was over, that William and I would never be free, and now—" She gestured at the mountains, the setting sun painting them gold and purple. "A new beginning I never dared imagine." "Are you afraid?" Miles asked gently. Josephine considered the question. "Not of Edgar anymore. Mr. Gibbs's news about the new sheriff makes me think he'll have his own troubles to worry about soon." She turned to face Miles fully. "But starting over in a new place, that is frightening." "You won't be alone," Miles reminded her. "No," she agreed, her gaze holding his. "And that makes all the difference." Something in her voice, in the way she looked at him, gave Miles the courage to ask the question that had been on his mind since Martha's prodding days earlier. "Josephine," he began, his voice rougher than he intended. "When we reach Sacramento and get these mining claims established, what then?" "What do you mean?" Miles chose his words carefully. "I mean us, this arrangement." He gestured between them. "Business partners is what we agreed, but I've been wondering if you might consider something more." "Someday," Josephine's eyes widened slightly, a blush rising to her cheeks. "Miles, my marriage to Edgar was a nightmare. I never thought I'd want to be anyone's wife again." Miles nodded, hiding his disappointment. "I understand." "I shouldn't have presumed—" "No," she interrupted, placing her hand on his arm. "You didn't let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I never thought I'd want to be anyone's wife again until I met you." Hope flared in Miles's chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that these past 2 weeks have shown me what kind of man you truly are. Kind, honorable, brave." Her voice softened. "The way you are with William, the risks you've taken for us, it's made me believe that not all men are like Edgar, that some are worth trusting with my heart." Miles stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I would never hurt you, Josephine, never raise my voice or my hand to you or William. That's a promise I can make without reservation." "I know," she whispered. "I've seen the truth of you, Miles Dawson, and it's that truth I'm falling in love with." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, more powerful for its honesty. Miles felt as though something tight in his chest had finally loosened, allowing him to breathe fully for the first time in years. "I've been falling in love with you since the moment you stood in my doorway, protecting your son with everything you had," he confessed. "Your courage, your gentleness, your determination, they wake something in me I thought had died with my sister." Josephine's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "What is that?" "Hope," Miles said simply. "Hope for a future worth fighting for." He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but Josephine rose to meet him, her lips finding his in a kiss that held the promise of all they might become together. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his chest, and Miles wrapped his arms around her, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "We'll take it slowly," he promised. "Give William time to know me as more than just the man who helped you escape. Give yourself time to heal from what Edgar did to you." Josephine nodded against his chest. "Thank you for understanding." They stood together as twilight deepened around them, the first stars appearing overhead. Neither spoke, but Miles felt a sense of rightness, of coming home, that he had never experienced before. The wagon train reached Sacramento 2 days later, rolling into the bustling city in the late afternoon. The California gold rush had transformed what had once been a small settlement into a thriving center of commerce, with buildings of brick and stone rising alongside more humble wooden structures. Thomas Burke helped them find temporary lodgings at a respectable boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, who cooed over William and assured Josephine she had cared for many babies over the years. "You rest," she instructed them firmly. "Tomorrow is soon enough to begin your business in the city." They took her advice gratefully, exhausted from the long journey. Their room was small but clean, with a separate cradle for William that Mrs. Chen provided. Miles insisted on taking a chair by the window, giving Josephine and the baby the bed. "This isn't necessary," Josephine protested. "We can find you a proper room." "I've slept in far worse conditions," Miles assured her with a smile. "Besides, until we know how things stand with these mining claims, we should conserve our resources." The next morning, they set out to locate the claims office and determine the exact location and status of Josephine's inheritance. The government official who examined their documents nodded approvingly. "These appear to be in order, Mrs. Neal. 3 adjoining claims along the American River, about 20 miles northeast of the city. According to our records, they were properly registered by your father 5 years ago and have been maintained in good standing. Are they valuable?" Josephine asked hesitantly. The official adjusted his spectacles. Initial surveys were promising. "There's been significant gold extracted from neighboring claims. Of course, you'd need to work the land to know for certain." "And what would we need to begin such work?" Miles inquired. "Equipment, labor, capital for development," the man replied matter-of-factly. "It's not a small undertaking. Many claim owners partner with investors rather than attempting to work the land themselves." Miles and Josephine exchanged glances. Their limited funds would not stretch to the kind of investment needed. "Is there a market for selling such claims?" Josephine asked. "If we chose not to develop them ourselves." "Indeed," the official confirmed. "Several mining companies are actively purchasing promising claims in that area. I could provide introductions if you wish." Josephine thanked him, and they left the office with a new set of possibilities to consider. As they walked back toward the boarding house, William sleeping peacefully in Josephine's arms, they discussed their options. "Selling would give us an immediate sum," Miles reasoned. "Enough to establish ourselves comfortably somewhere. But developing the claims ourselves could be more profitable in the long run," Josephine countered, "if they're as promising as he suggested." Miles studied her face. "What do you want to do, Josephine? Not just about the claims, but with your life now that you're free to choose." She was quiet for a moment, considering. "I want William to grow up somewhere peaceful, somewhere he can run and play without fear. I want—" She hesitated, then continued more softly, "I want a home. A real home, not just a house where I walk on eggshells and dread the sound of boots on the porch." Miles understood what she wasn't saying. The mining claims might offer wealth, but developing them meant living in a rough mining camp, surrounded by the same kind of men Josephine had just escaped. Even with Miles to protect her, it would be a hard life, especially for a woman with a young child. "Then we sell," he decided. "Take what money we can get and find that peaceful place you're dreaming of." Josephine looked up at him, relief evident in her expression. "You wouldn't mind giving up the chance to be a mine owner," Miles chuckled. "I've never cared much for wealth for its own sake. What matters to me is—" He paused, suddenly uncertain how to express what he truly wanted. "What matters to you, Miles?" Josephine prompted gently. You, he said simply. You and William. A chance to build something lasting with you both, that's worth more than any gold mine. The look she gave him then, full of tenderness and dawning joy, was worth every hardship he had endured to reach this moment. With the help of the claims office, they arranged meetings with representatives from 2 mining companies interested in the property. The first offered a sum that seemed generous until the second doubled it, recognizing the strategic value of the adjoining claims to their existing operations. Within a week, the sale was complete. Josephine found herself with more money than she had ever possessed, enough to secure their future wherever they chose to settle. "Where shall we go?" she asked Miles as they sat in a small park near the boarding house, watching William kick his legs happily on a blanket spread beneath a shade tree. Miles had been considering that very question. "I thought perhaps Oregon," he suggested. "The Willamette Valley is fertile, green, good farmland available at reasonable prices, a place where a man could build a proper home, raise livestock, grow crops. A farm." Josephine's eyes lit up at the prospect. "Like the one I grew up on," Miles nodded. "If that would please you, it's peaceful country with established towns nearby for supplies and schooling when William is older." He hesitated, then added, "Room enough for other children too someday." "If you wanted that." The blush that colored Josephine's cheeks was answer enough, but she replied anyway. "I would like that very much." They left Sacramento the following week, traveling by steamship up the coast to Portland and then by stagecoach to the Willamette Valley. The journey was comfortable, a far cry from their desperate flight through the Nevada mountains. The valley welcomed them with rolling green hills, stands of tall timber, and clear rivers. In a small but growing town called Riverton, they found a farm for sale, 160 acres of good land with a modest house, a barn, and established orchards. "It needs work," the current owner apologized as he showed them the property. "My wife passed last year and I'm too old to manage it alone. My daughters asked me to come live with her family in Portland." "It's perfect," Josephine declared, already envisioning what the house could become with fresh paint, curtains at the windows, flowers in the yard. They bought the farm that day and took possession a week later. The town welcomed them warmly, especially after Miles explained they were recently married and looking to make a fresh start. It was a small deception that protected Josephine's reputation and allowed them to begin their new life without unwanted questions about their past. As summer turned to autumn, they settled into a routine. Miles worked from dawn to dusk, repairing fences, mending the barn roof, preparing the fields for spring planting. Josephine turned the house into a home, cooking, cleaning, planting a kitchen garden despite the late season. William thrived in the clean country air, growing stronger each day. They still slept separately, Miles in the small room off the kitchen that had once been a pantry, Josephine and William in the main bedroom upstairs. But their evenings were spent together by the fire, talking, planning, sometimes simply enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. As October painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson, Miles decided it was time to make official what had grown between them. On a crisp Sunday morning, he hitched the wagon and asked Josephine to join him for a drive. "Where are we going?" she asked as she settled William in her lap, tucking a blanket around him against the autumn chill. "It's a surprise," Miles replied with a smile, flicking the reins to start the horses. He drove to a hilltop overlooking their farm where a massive oak tree spread its branches against the blue sky. When he helped Josephine down from the wagon, she gasped at the view their land spread out below them, the house and barn nestled among the orchards, with the town visible in the distance and mountains rising beyond. "It's beautiful," she breathed, holding William up so he could see too, though at 5 months he was more interested in grabbing at falling leaves than admiring the scenery. Miles took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. "I brought you up here because I wanted you to see everything we've begun to build together." Josephine turned to him, her eyes soft with understanding. "And it is beautiful, Miles, more than I ever dared to hope for." "It can be more," he said quietly. From his pocket, he withdrew a small box. "This was my mother's. I've carried it with me since I left Texas, thinking someday I might find someone worthy of it." Josephine's eyes widened as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "Miles. I know we haven't known each other long," he continued, "but some things a man just knows in his heart." He took her free hand in his. "Josephine Neal, I love you. I love William as if he were my own son. I want to be your husband in truth, not just in the story we tell the townspeople." Tears filled Josephine's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "I love you too," she whispered. "You've shown me what a real marriage should be built on respect and kindness and mutual care." "Is that a yes?" Miles asked, his heart pounding. "Yes," Josephine replied without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Miles Dawson." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her and William into his embrace. As he held them both, Miles felt a sense of completion, of rightness, that he had never known before. They were married 2 weeks later in the town's small church, with William cooing in Martha Burke's arms as she watched from the front pew. Thomas and his family had settled just 30 miles away and had become dear friends during the months since their journey together. That night, as husband and wife in truth at last, they discovered a new dimension to the love that had grown between them on the long road from Nevada. In the quiet darkness of their bedroom, with William sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby, they came together as one, healing the last wounds Edgar had inflicted on Josephine's spirit with gentle touches and whispered words of devotion. "I never knew it could be like this," Josephine confessed afterward, nestled against Miles's chest. "So tender." Miles pressed a kiss to her forehead. "This is how it should always be between a man and woman who love each other, a giving, not a taking." The years that followed brought the happiness they both had sought for so long. The farm prospered under Miles's careful management, expanding to include cattle and horses alongside the crops and orchards. Josephine made their house a true home, filling it with warmth and laughter. William grew into a strong, kind-hearted boy who called Miles Pa from the moment he could speak, never knowing any other father. When he was 3, a sister joined the family, Emma Rose Dawson, born on a spring morning with her father's dark hair and her mother's bright eyes. 2 years later, twins followed Robert and Richard, identical in appearance but opposite in temperament from the start. The house that had once seemed too large for just 3 people now rang with the noise and joy of a bustling family. On the 10th anniversary of the night Josephine had appeared at Miles's cabin door, they sat together on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set over their flourishing farm. "Did you ever imagine we would have all this?" Josephine asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. Miles covered her hand with his, feeling the wedding band that had never left her finger. "I hoped," he admitted. "From the moment you kissed me that day in the mountains, I hoped." Josephine smiled, remembering, "You saved us, Miles." "In every way a person can be saved." "No," he corrected her gently. "We saved each other. I was just as lost as you were in my own way." He gazed out at their children, William, now a thoughtful 10-year-old, Emma, a spirited 7, the twins 5 and full of mischief. "They saved us too. Gave us something to live for beyond ourselves." As if sensing he was being discussed, William looked up from the game he was playing with his siblings. He waved at his parents, his smile so like his mother's it made Miles's heart swell with pride and love. "William asked me something interesting today," Josephine said, watching her firstborn return to the game. "He wanted to know if I was afraid the night I ran away from Edgar." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That I was terrified, but that sometimes being brave means doing what's necessary even when you're scared." She turned to look at Miles, her eyes reflecting the same love he felt for her. "I told him that's when I discovered how strong I really was." Miles pulled her closer. "You were always strong, Josephine. You just needed the chance to remember it." As darkness fell and they called the children in for supper, Miles thought about the unlikely path that had led them here, a desperate woman with bruises on her face and a baby in her arms. A lonely man with wounds of his own that needed healing. How close they had come to missing each other entirely. Some would call it chance, but Miles knew better. In a world often cruel and unforgiving, they had found in each other the sanctuary every soul seeks. Not just shelter from the storm, but a place to grow, to flourish, to become their truest selves. The fresh bruises had long since healed, leaving no trace on Josephine's radiant face. The fear that had driven her through the rain that night was only a distant memory. In its place stood a woman confident in her strength and secure in her family's love. And Miles, who had once been content to live alone with his memories and regrets, now found purpose in each new day, in teaching his sons to ride, in braiding his daughter's hair, in the quiet moments beside his wife when the children were finally asleep. They had made of their scars a map to guide others. Their home had become a safe haven for women in similar circumstances, a place of temporary refuge where Miles and Josephine could help them find the strength to begin again, just as they had. It wasn't the life either of them had envisioned in their youth. It was better, richer, deeper, more meaningful than they could have imagined. Built not on dreams but on the solid foundation of a love that had been tested and proven in the crucible of adversity. As they gathered their family around the table that night, Miles caught Josephine's eye across the happy chaos of their children's chatter. The look they shared held a decade of memories, of challenges overcome, of joy discovered in the simplest moments. "I love you," he mouthed silently. Josephine's smile was radiant in the lamplight. "Always," she whispered back, and in that moment the circle was complete. The woman who had run through the storm had found not just safety but true sanctuary. The man who had hidden her had found his own salvation in the family they had built together. It was enough. It was everything.